guys, welcome back to the channel. Please make sure to like and subscribe and check out my other advice videos. I apologize for like that subtle ringing in the background. I don't know what that is. It literally came on as soon as I started recording. So I recently asked on the channel what kind of videos I would like to see, and I got a very interesting question, and it made me realize like I think everyone experiences this without realizing it. At least for me, like of course I go through this, but I never realized I did until the question was brought up. To sum it up, it was like, how do you slip out of little space and feel okay with that? Like advice for, you always hear people how to slip into little space, but how do you come out of it and like still feel okay? And like you always hear advice on that but not the other. So I thought that's a really good question, and I definitely want to make a video about it. However, it is a bit tricky because now I have to sit and think like, how do you do that? Because personally, I don't actually know, and I haven't heard anyone talk about that before. So I wrote in my little notebook quite a few pages worth of information. I hope it doesn't get lost in translation, but I'm literally just gonna read it off. Usually I just talk and say what comes to mind, but I feel like I would say nonsense if I didn't write it down, and I still feel like it's going to be nonsense. But let's just get started with the advice. Ways to slip out of little space. Put the items away that make you regress. Like stop watching videos that trigger regression. I feel like this is very obvious. If you have a certain item that really makes you feel little, without a doubt, every time, like for me, it's my Lammy bonnet. And if I know I'm going to a place where I can't regress, then I'm not going to wear that. Or dressing up in a certain way makes me feel little, like my tutus, my blouses, knee-high socks, cute shoes, stuff like that. I'm going to save that for another time. Or doing certain type of hairstyles such as pigtails, save that for another time, because without a doubt, those, though it won't make me regress every single time, most of the time I will regress from those items. So I'm not going to have that on. I'm going to make sure I dress up like a big girl and go from there. So it's kind of for planning ahead. If you're going somewhere and you know you can't regress in that situation, don't bring stuff that's going to make you regress. Don't bring stuff that's going to comfort you through regression, because then you're going to not fall back to those comfort items. The next thing is exercising. So for some reason, I cannot be little and exercise. They just don't go hand in hand. So exercising, stretching, working out, going outside for walks, nature hikes. Sometimes there are little space activity nature hikes, but like big hikes, like mountain climbing, I'm talking going for runs. For me, exercising and working out, that's not a baby's job. That's a big girl job. So try that if you can. If you're in a situation where, you know, you're feeling regress, but you can't just start lifting the weights, I get it. Maybe like at home or something and you don't want to be regress for the day, or you feel like you're slipping, and I don't know, this is like personal, but if you're going through a tough dilemma with your partner and you don't want to regress because regressing makes you want them more, or makes you need a caregiver and you feel lonely, then start exercising or working out, because then it's gonna kind of push both of those thoughts away. Okay, now we're getting into the like not so much like stuff to do, but like actual advice, like things I wrote down a lot, like it's like a book, and I'm just gonna read it out of my notebook. Here we go. For me, little space is mainly involuntary. Sometimes I do force it, but most of the time it just happens at complete random. Obviously there are things that I know that will trigger it, such as like if my boyfriend is talking to me in a certain type of way and that's going to trigger the regression and I don't want to regress, then I'll ask him not to say those things to me, like you calling me a little girl, or like pulling me up and walking me through the store or something. If I don't want to regress in that moment, I'll ask him not to do those things for me. However, a lot of the time I just can't, like it just happens, whether it's just my monthly cycle. For some reason I always regress on my period. That's just how I am. Or triggers, there's a lot of triggers, a lot of stress, a lot of built up stuff in the world and high emotions, and I end up just regressing. I don't have any problem going into it, but going out of it, I never really forced it upon myself to pull out of it. Like I don't really think I've ever like made myself stop regressing, because if I do try to make myself, it's bad. But we're gonna get into that. For me, little space is mainly involuntary, something that just randomly happened. It's not something I force, and therefore coming out of it is not something I've ever forced upon myself either. For me, little space is more so what I feel, how I take in and perceive the world around me, rather than the actions and behaviors that I show. I'm not speaking with me and my boyfriend because this is a completely different scenario, but for other people, when I regress, they could not tell. Like there are people in my life that know I regress just because we've been together for so long and it just came out, but they would never know I was in a regress state because I don't outwardly show it. I mask a lot. Most of the time I don't even regress in public. It's really just at home. But if I am finding myself a situation in public and it just happens, nobody's gonna be able to tell. So I don't like regressing in public or around people, even around those who know about it. Sometimes it still happens. I always have something on me that I can play with, that I can fidget with when that does happen, whether that be like a bottle, like not a baby bottle, but like a water bottle to drink, like some type of small stuffy. I'm gonna be so honest, and I'm sorry to say it, since I am a girl and I feel like I look like a very soft girl, like that's just my aesthetic and it's what it has been. I kind of get away with holding stuffed animals around me in public more. No one's really said anything because like I keep my bunny Halo with me all the time. Like she comes into restaurants with me, she comes into the store with me, she goes on hikes with me. Even if I'm not little, like she's just with me, she's a part of my family. So to me it's not weird to have a stuffed animal in public. However, if you do feel uncomfortable, like if you are somebody that would get stares from that, then you could also go for a fidget spinner, or I will have hoodies on my strings on my hoodie that I play with, or gum to chew on, jewelry like my necklace. I literally fidget with this all the time, so I fidget a lot, and that kind of just helps take the stress away, helps me zone out and like just not really focus on anything, because when I'm like fidgeting I don't even realize I'm doing it sometimes. Like it's just happening and I zone out, and zoning out can help you get out of regression. So regression, I feel like you're hyper focused on how you feel, at least for me, and it's like, oh, I feel too small to do this, like I just want to go home, I just want to bundle up, you know, I want something, like I want a toy to play with, I want my passies, something like that. And to me that is like hyper focusing on my feelings. But if I completely zone out and like don't really think about anything, or think about the most random things that it's just nonsense, then it slowly pulls me out of regression without me even realizing it. And I didn't know that until I was sitting down writing stuff that I could talk about, and I realized, yeah, that is something I could do. So just try to make yourself zone out by fidgeting, and then eventually just getting lost in thought until you know how small you feel is the last thing on your mind. I never really try to force anything upon myself, because the more I push for something, the more it pushes back, and then emotions get very high intensity, it's unbalanced, it's chaotic. Breaking that down is like, if I'm trying to force myself to not cry, then I'm gonna cry more. If I focus too much on not wanting to be little, then it's gonna make me more little, because I'm thinking about it, and the more I think about something, the more it's like, oh, I'm pushing for this thing, and then that thing is like, no, you can't have it. So if I don't want to be little, then it's like, oh, too bad. So that's just kind of how my brain works. I don't know if it's the same for you. That's why I never really try to force anything on myself. I'm trying to speak from personal experience, but I don't have a lot of personal experience, because like I said, I never force myself out of little space. If it's something that happens, it happens for a reason. Usually I like being little. Usually I want that regression. Like it helps me in the moment. So for me, it's normal to feel weird in my skin and dissociate when coming out of little space. At first, that made me super uncomfortable, like that yucky, gross feeling. Just like, who am I? It's weird. I don't know fully how to describe dissociation. If you're somebody that has it, then you know, and if you don't, good for you. It's literally so hard to explain, and I think you should watch another video on somebody that can actually explain it better than I can. Dissociation is not a good feeling. You just kind of feel confused in like a dazed, blurry state, like you're living through life but not through your, like not in your, like you're not you. Your skin is not yours. This is just a shell. I'm looking kind of like down at myself. I always feel that when coming out of little space. I think dissociation might be normal to feel after being little, whether you came out of it naturally or if it was forced out. So I would say in that situation, if you are somebody that dissociates or feels kind of gross when you are coming out of little space, whether that be intentional or not, just breathe, focus on how your chest feels, how it moves up and down with your breaths. I know everyone says just take a breath, just step outside. I know it's not that simple, because dissociation is more than that. If anything, sometimes breathing can actually make you feel weird. It's like you can feel every blink of your eyes, or you can feel the way your tongue is positioned in your mouth. I'm sorry if that made you uncomfortable, but it's weird. It's like nothing feels right. I got cut off and now I'm trying to remember what I was saying. So basically just though, little space and dissociation kind of go hand in hand with me. The breathing really doesn't work for you, because I know that's terrible advice. Like, you can't really just take a breath and those feelings are gonna go away, but I still say at least try. I just remind myself that this moment is temporary, just with little space. If you don't want to be in it, remember it's temporary. Dissociation, I struggle saying that word, is temporary. Every moment of every life, everything you're doing is temporary, and time will pass and you'll feel better, you'll feel worse, then you'll feel better again, and that's just kind of how life is. So just kind of wait for the silly little moment to pass. And that's really the only advice I can give for you if you are struggling with feeling kind of dissociated or something along the lines after you regress. It's kind of just waiting it out. Just being still. Taking a moment for yourself. Quiet. Like, I know the world is so chaotic. And just kind of getting off your phone. Maybe kind of distracting yourself by just being still and patient and waiting for those moments to pass. Another thing you can try, if you know a situation is coming up where you shouldn't regress, like examples, work functions, or maybe you're going on a trip with your family, you don't want to regress around them, you're going in public and you don't want to regress in this place. If you can plan ahead, then I think it's better than just waiting for the moment to see. Putting away stuff that triggers your regressions, of course. For example, for me, watching other little space content creators always makes me feel a little like without fail. If I want to be a little and I can't, then I'm gonna watch other people being little, and that's just gonna help me, or like advice videos. That's what helps me regress. However, if I don't want that, then I'm gonna put that content away. I'm gonna go on Instagram Reels and watch cooking videos instead. Watch dramas instead. If I'm watching other people in regression states, then that's going to make me regress. If I need to go for a period of time without regressing, then I won't consume that content. As for me, the less I indulge in it, the less I regress. It's like a weird phase cycle that I go through. If I don't watch any regression videos, I'm not going to regress, and it's eventually just going to become less and less and less until I don't do it at all, until like my period comes, and then that cycle hits, and then I regress again, and then it's like starting over. By all means, I'm not saying regression is bad, and it's not something I don't ever want to happen to me again. Like, I like it. I'm this way for a reason. It does help me. However, I do tend to forget about my little side if I don't consume that media for like an extended amount of time. And throughout the cycles, throughout the phases of my little phases, it can be pushed back. And if you're somebody that's gonna get triggered more by little space content and you don't want to regress, then don't consume that content. And I feel like it's as simple as that. So this is a hard topic for me to touch on, because little space isn't something I really try to force upon myself. It's also not something I force out, because I know if I do try to force myself out of the state, it usually ends up with me in tears, which makes me regress even more, because the more I cry, the more I feel vulnerable. The more vulnerable I feel, the more little I feel. I don't know if it's just me, but if you feel like you are the same as me in that regard, then perhaps instead of trying to force yourself not to be in little space, then maybe try to mask your little space instead. Perhaps instead of trying to force yourself out of little space and your mind and body isn't ready to come out of it yet, then learn how to mask it. Like, I'm not saying that regression wherever, whenever is necessarily good all the time. However, there is a reason for your regression. Maybe something triggered it in order to help you cope, in order to keep yourself safe. Your mind wants you to be little for a reason. I say, instead of shunning those emotions or trying to push them away, embrace them. Sorry, I literally read off everything I said because I think that was good and I knew I would forget it. Just try to embrace those feelings. Little space is there for a reason to help you. Be little if it's what's best for you at the time. I know I said this is going to help you get out of little space and all that, and how to cope with getting out of it or forcing yourself out of it, but maybe forcing yourself out of it isn't the best option. And if that's the case, then try to mask your little space the best you can. So in like public situations, even though I very rarely hardly regress with others, at work, with friends, sometimes it does happen. There's moments I can recall in my life of me regressing even though I didn't necessarily want to. In those moments, instead of trying to push myself out of it because I know I'm regressing for a reason, I kind of just slip out of the group, or even if my body's present, my mind slips out. I get more quiet, and I'm very naturally soft-spoken and quiet, so it's not like a huge difference. Like, people can't notice that huge shift if I'm being more quiet, because that's just who I am. This is regarding my boyfriend. Like, I'm not like that with him, but this is around everybody else, because his story in my little space is completely different. Instead of my pushing myself out of it because I know it's there for me to help me, I'm just going to mask it. I take a step back from the group or the scene I'm in. I rely on my quiet nature. I kind of just close off for a bit, but it's not something that's like super out there. Nobody's gonna know for me. I like to doodle cute things in my notebook or what, like on a napkin or anything. I'm still expressing my little side because she loves to be expressive without me showing it, you know? So she can still express herself and not be out there. Like, other people won't know that I'm little by me coloring or like doodling. And so I'll do stuff like that instead of, you know, bringing a pacifier bottle with me. I'm just gonna doodle in my notebook. Way to switch out of little space if you really need to is if you are with people having conversations. You don't even have to be the one talking, but listening to others' conversations, them talking to you or telling you a story. It's like distracting your mind, and it's slowly pulling you out of little space until it just like fades away without me personally even realizing it. So like actual me comes back, little me goes away, and I didn't even notice the transition because I'm just experiencing life. I'm just talking with people, having conversations, listening to people, and I'm thinking about work specifically, like in public, and I'm at work and I know I shouldn't regress, and then it happens, but then I have to deal with the customer. I'll just listen to the customer's story, I'll let them talk, and we'll share conversations, and eventually I will forget that I'm regressed. I'll forget that I was regressed, I should say, and it slowly fades away. And that really helps with dissociation because you're not noticing the transition of little you to big you. You might now because I pointed it out, but basically I kind of just want to end things off by saying it's natural to feel unnatural at times. It's natural to not feel like yourself or to feel kind of yucky. It's natural to not want to be in little space sometimes or to want to be in little space sometimes. Like, this is just how we experience life, at least for me. And so not making it a big deal, not making, like, your emotions are there, but are they valid? Almost kind of like say, like, yeah, emotions are valid, but are they really? Like, is it a genuine emotion or is it in the moment emotion? And so just like letting time pass. And maybe you just have to deal with the dissociation discomfort feeling for a while, but that feeling is not going to be there forever. So even if it lasts for an uncomfortable amount of time, like, you're strong, you can get through it. I know it's not the best advice video because it's like, I don't know, like, that was a good question, but those are just kind of things like reflecting that I do in the way I think. So if you do dissociate after little space, yeah, it sucks. It really does suck, and there's no other way to put it. But if you need to be big, you need to be big, and it's like, put your big boy pants on. We can get through this together. So just live life how you want to live it. And if you can't, if you want to regress, if there's somebody making you feel like you shouldn't be regressing, and that's the reason you don't want to regress, then sorry, that's gonna get this demonetized. But like, truly, because those people aren't worth your time. And I'm not saying like make people uncomfortable by being baby in front of them if they don't want you to be a baby, but in your mind, like, you can still be little without like showing that off. You know, if you're not ready to come out of regression today, no matter the situation, then don't. Work around it, problem solve around it. And that's my only advice and opinions. I don't know, hope that helped. I love y'all. Stay true to yourself. Bye.